So good to be here this morning. So grateful to be able to be a part of this group and all that's taking place. And as has already been said, we're certainly glad to have all our new members, certainly glad to have Tyler back with us, and look forward to spending time with him in the weeks, days, months, and years that are ahead of us. Well, this morning we're continuing a series. We have one, maybe two lessons left to go in our tour of the house that we've called Home Improvement, in which we're making our way through the various rooms of our dwelling places. And the goal of this, as we said from the very beginning, is that we would come to see all of the people who occupy or that we share our dwelling places with, whether roommates, siblings, parents, spouses, children, that we come to see all the people that we are living our lives with as persons who bear the image of God, as icons of God Himself, as the Scriptures tell us they are. But that we would also come to appreciate every moment that we share with these people in our lives and in our homes as holy. And that ultimately we would even come to the place where we see all the spaces as sacred. You know, in ancient Israel, there was like one truly sacred space, and that was the temple or the tabernacle and the Holy of Holies, where God dwelt with His people. And yet we see that from the time that Jesus was crucified and the veil was opened, not only do we find that we have access into the holy place, into the presence of God from anywhere at any time, but we also see that that tearing of the veil is also God coming out and holiness spreading from that point throughout all the earth. And perhaps we could come to learn to look upon one another, upon every moment and upon every space as an opportunity to encounter God in a meaningful way. This is especially true for the room that we have as our focus point this morning. Everybody's been waiting for this. It's the bedroom. So here we are. Someone said that marriage is choosing or promising to spend the rest of your life sleeping beside someone in a room that is too hot, sleeping beside someone who, for them, the room is too cold. That's a pretty good definition of marriage in some ways. But in Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 4, the Bible very clearly says this about marriage. He says, "Let marriage be held in honor among all." Everyone, whether married or single, whether you've ever been married or ever hope to marry, whether you are married or not, everyone who is a Christian is called upon in this verse to look at the estate of marriage as something to be honored, something to be valued, something to be respected, appreciated, that we ought to see the goodness in it. We're often warned, and rightly so, that we don't want to turn anything into an idol or a substitute for God, and that includes the family. But I don't think that that's the trend in the time in which we're living. And what we need perhaps more than anything else is to be exhorted to maintain a high view of the home and of the family and of marriage itself. Marriage is to be held in honor among all. And along with that, then he says that the marriage bed is undefiled, or let it be undefiled. For God will judge the sexually immoral and the adulterous. What I want us to recognize here is that there are, as we said in the first lesson, no unsacred places, only sacred places and desecrated places, as he describes here. But the devil is doing a number on us in the time that we're living in by throwing dirt on the sacred space of the marriage bed. And he does this in a number of ways, one of which is by cheapening our understanding or our attitude or our thinking about the sexual relationship. We're told over and over again in the world today that sex is a basically meaningless bodily function, pretty much like any other biological urge that we experience, and that it has no value beyond the physical pleasure that it has on offer. And therefore, it does not matter who you are with, how many you are with, or what you do when you are with them, provided they are consenting adults. And even that, it seems to me, is a value that is eroding And this thin view of what sex is one of those lies that I don't think anybody really believes, but that everyone or almost everyone in our culture parrots. And therefore, America is full of sexually active, but unloving and unloved people, and therefore increasingly lonely people. The devil also accomplishes his ends by convincing Christians into thinking that sex is a shameful necessity that's best left unsaid and never discussed in polite company. The consequence of that is that the world maintains a monopoly on the spiritual formation of ourselves and of our children. Their understanding, their imagination, their values about what sexuality is about is being shaped by the internet, being shaped by movies, being shaped by music, and the church stays silent. And yet the Bible provides us not only warnings against sexual immorality, but provides us with a very positive and powerful understanding of what sexuality, what within the context of marriage is all about. And it is a beautiful and compelling picture if only the church has the confidence to present boldly what the scriptures have to say about this matter. And so we want to try to do so this morning. The Bible actually has a tremendous amount of positive things to say about the marriage bed, to use that euphemism from Hebrews 13:4. And so let us begin there with that passage. In the passage, we see that he contrasts sexual immorality on the one hand with the honor and purity of the marriage bed on the other. And what I want you to notice is that not only is marriage in general holy, but the marriage bed in particular, he says, is undefiled. It's to be kept undefiled, and it is undefiled when approached properly within the loving confines of a covenant marriage, a lifelong covenant between husband and wife. And the word undefiled is an important word here. Because it's stated negatively, undefiled, perhaps we could look at that and say, well, what he's saying is it's not too bad. That lovemaking within marriage is not too tainted. But that's not at all the point. He says it is undefiled. That is, it is without defilement. In other words, it is pure. It's holy. It's pleasing completely in God's eyes. He's not embarrassed by this. And in no way do those who participate in it within this context defile themselves in doing so. The same word that's used here to describe the marriage bed is used in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 4 to describe our inheritance that's reserved for us in heaven. It is an undefiled inheritance. He's not saying by that your inheritance in heaven is only a little bit tainted. It's only kind of dirty. No, it's without any defilement whatsoever. The same word's used elsewhere in the same book of Hebrews to describe the priesthood of Jesus. His priesthood is undefiled. It is completely free of defilement. What I'm saying is if you are a married man or woman, lovemaking within that context has absolutely zero defilement associated with it. It is pure and holy in the eyes of God. In Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 and 28, tracing things all the way back to the beginning, we see that this is God's good design. It says in verse 27 that God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number." We see in this verse that we're being taught that our sexuality is a fundamental design feature of our God. God is the one who designed our bodies the way that he has designed them, and he's designed them in this way to fulfill this particular purpose. And that God places his blessing over the union of husband and wife, over male and female, in order that they might propagate and fill the earth with offspring. 3 verses later, verse 31, is when God looks back on what he's done and all of his creation, with the high point of that creation being the creation of mankind in his image, male and female. He looks at that and he says, that right there is very good. That was good work. He pats himself, as it were, on the back. I did a good job. God doesn't look at that and say, oh, that's a bit cringe, or that's a little bit askew. No, this is God's good design, and he is proud of and pleased with and approves of what he has created. How much more so should we? In Genesis chapter 2, the next chapter over, where we get a more focused picture of the creation of mankind, and he shows us that having paraded the animals before Adam, and he finds there that there's not one who is a suitable companion for himself, that God, in that sense of lack on Adam's part, puts him into the deep sleep, and from his side creates Eve to be his suitable companion. And when Adam awakens from this, he sees what God has done, and he thinks that, again, God has done good work. And he says in verse 24 that that's why a man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And then he adds, Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. Now, this whole section in Genesis 2 is very intentional in the wording. First of all, he tells us in the context that Eve is made for Adam to be like Adam. Unlike the animals that he had just named, Eve is different in that she is like Adam. She is bone of his bones, flesh of his flesh. So men and women share the vast majority of our natures in common. We are humans, we are bearers of the divine image. But he also emphasizes the difference, that she is like him, but she is also, in the language, literally opposite him. The same, but with an important distinction and difference in the male and female binary. Not as an adversary, but as a complement to him. And so that they are fit for one another in every way and can come together united as one. All of this, again, God's design. So marriage and sex, even before the fall, was a gloriously wonderful thing, but was also going to be a difficult thing. In other words, even if mankind had never sinned, I still think as the species was propagated and the earth was filled with boys and girls who grew up into men and women who would then leave their mothers and fathers and marry each other, there would still be some difficulty associated with that, simply from the fact that men and women are different. And they come at life and experience life and see themselves, they see each other, they see the world through very different perspectives and different lenses. And that itself is part of God's very good design. It's not good, he says, for the man to be alone and to have only that perspective on life. He needs a suitable companion opposite to him to see things differently so that they come together and see things more holistically. And so this is God's design, even though it would have been a challenging thing to deal with. But when you add Genesis 3, the fall, you bring sin into the picture, where now selfishness and the frustrations of living life in a fallen world come to play. It becomes not just difficult, but very difficult. And so we have what has been described through the ages as the war of the sexes. Someone has said it's a war that no one's going to win because there's just too much fraternizing with the enemy. That's pretty clever. But increasingly, it does look like it's a war that both sides are losing. And both sides like to point at the other as the cause of the whole problem. If you follow any of the social media influencers today, whether those who advocate for the men and the manosphere or the feminists on the ladies' side, you get a lot of finger pointing. But again, what this actually indicates is what I've been trying to describe, and that is that men and women are different. They see things differently, but what we have got to do is we've got to come to a place where we see it from God's perspective that these differences are there for each other, for the benefit of all, for the good and the flourishing of humanity, not as a means of castigating the other and dismissing their perspective as of being no account and no value. There's an increasing percentage of people who do not marry. Marriage is in decline in Western civilization in general. The age at which people marry is continually getting older, and therefore the number of children being born is falling, even in most advanced countries, below replacement rate. And in some places, alarmingly and even disastrously below replacement rates. If you want to do some kind of scary research, just look up some things about that, particularly in places like Japan or South Korea, where many demographers say it's like already too late. These societies are destined to collapse, and even if they turned it around tomorrow, they would not be able to pull out of this death spiral that they are in. And so governments around the world are enacting policies to try to increase fertility rates to little effect. And young men and young women are increasingly finding it difficult to come together. And I think in large part because of the influence of social media influencers, again, both men and women, in which you will find perhaps 10% good advice and 90% toxic sewage. And so I want to say a few words to the unmarried and then wrap up with a word to the married. First, to the young and to the unmarried. My word of encouragement to you is do not give up on the idea of marriage and family. Jarrett last week cited some statistics. I don't remember the numbers, but it's a remarkable amount of young people who have no desire, no intention of going this direction with their life. And I want to encourage you to, if you're here, if you're a Christian, to think about that as differently as it is possible for you in your particular circumstance. And it may not be for everyone, I understand that. And I don't want to place on anyone a burden that is not theirs to bear. But generally speaking, most young people should anticipate, look forward, and try to prepare themselves for marriage. In Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 22, the scripture says, "He who finds a wife finds what is good and receives favor from the Lord." And so this is a blessing. Marriage is a blessing. Finding a spouse, finding a husband, finding a wife is a good thing. And I would simply say, as a personal anecdote, that I have found marriage and family to be the greatest blessing that the Lord has given me in this life. In other words, yes, the giving of His Son, the Lord Jesus, who has saved my soul, is far and away the greatest blessing that any one of us can ever enjoy. But within the context of life under the sun, there is nothing that even comes close to the joy, the feelings of satisfaction, the feelings even to some degree, though I'm still far from finished, of accomplishment. And having loved the same woman for maybe about over 36 years, I believe it is. 36 going on 37 years. It's been amazing. And our 4 children who love the Lord, who are bringing up their own children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, that is just... Well, I'm overcome with gratitude to God for this blessing. I have found favor from the Lord. I found a good woman and am incredibly blessed by that. And I would encourage you to seek that blessing not only for your own self-fulfillment, but because marriage and children are the wellspring of civilization. And as serious Christian young men and serious Christian young women, you should want to participate in that. The future belongs to those who actually show up for it. And God said, I want you to be fruitful. I want you to multiply. I want you to fill the earth. And Christians should take this mandate seriously and seek to raise up godly offspring and to perpetuate that into the future. To do so will require deliberate goals on your part and sustained effort, focused effort. Young men, as we say all the time, I just can't encourage you enough how important it is and how difficult it may be, however difficult it may be, to stay away from pornography. It is an absolute brain acid. Work hard. Don't ever avoid difficult things. Lean into difficult things. Develop your character and develop a skill set so that you become competent young men who are prepared to take a wife, to care for her children. This is noble and good. And of all the goals that you're making in life, that should be among the top. I was talking to someone just the other day who was telling me about a young man that he met who was exceptionally gifted student, could literally have gone to almost any law school, any school for become a doctor or surgeon or whatever he wanted to do. And he asked him what he was going to do. He said, I'm going to electrician school. And he said, well, why are you doing that? He said, I can quickly and with very little to no debt be in a position to provide for a wife and children soon. And that's what I want to do with my life. I think that's a worthwhile ambition. And young women, I don't know, I told the guys to stay away from porn. I'll tell you, just stay off of TikTok, okay? Just stay away from TikTok. You also work hard, build character, and have standards, but be pursuable. I've told the young men to pursue, be pursuable. I've always said that a guy should look for a girl that, has qualities that he's been looking for, but one thing that you want to make sure of is that you're faster than she is. You want to be able to catch her. And girls, you want to be physically fit, but you want to be catchable. Let the hearer understand. All right, to the married. Maintaining a vibrant and fulfilling love life over the decades requires a lot. It requires, number one, discipline or self-control, which the scriptures define as a fruit of the Spirit, something that God gives us that enables us to continue having a vibrant, fulfilling love life well into our later years, something the world can hardly imagine. The discipline that it takes to be enraptured by the love of the same man, the same woman, decade after decade. Time takes its toll on all of us. I know this is hard for you to believe, but I once was better looking than I am today. Janice and I are both decades older than we were when we met. And so we ought to all seek to do within reason the things that are helpful in taking care of ourselves, proper diet, exercise, grooming, dressing ourselves appropriately to present ourselves well to the other. These are all good things that we should seek to do. And husbands specifically need to discipline and train themselves to be obedient to Proverbs 5:18 and 19, where we are commanded to rejoice in the wife of your youth. May her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated with her love. This is what God is calling us to do, and it's a disciplined response that we learn as we focus our attention on one woman for one lifetime. Not merely to be faithful and avoid others, but also to be enraptured and intoxicated by the love of the woman that God has given to you. Choose your love and then love your choice. And wives need to be obedient to Song of Solomon 5:16, where she says, his mouth is sweetness itself. Janice says it all the time. He is altogether lovely. This is my beloved. This is my friend. Number two, it takes availability. 1 Corinthians 7 verses 3 through 5 says the husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. And then he goes on to say that each does not have authority over their own body, but yields that to the other. Now, this isn't to be used to force oneself upon their mate. Yielding oneself to the other is always a gift that we make, and particularly husbands, even within marriage, have no right to force themselves upon their wives or to beat them metaphorically with this verse. This is a verse that we as husbands need to take seriously, and we as wives need to take seriously and strive to be obedient to, and recognize that I have a responsibility as a spouse to be available in this intimate way with my spouse. And then he says, and then thirdly, creativity. Creativity. I'm not putting a verse up, but read the Song of Solomon. This is always good for your marriage and for your love life. Read Song of Solomon. Different places, different times. That's as far as I'm going to go with all of that. But spice it up, you know. But I also want to urge, and I want to be as delicate as I can with this, but I also want to be plain because it's important. Creativity is not the same thing as kinky. Kink is a value that is imported from the world, and Paul teaches us that a man should learn to possess his vessel in sanctification and in honor, not the way he says that pagans do in their twisted passions. And so while lovemaking should be highly charged, intense and dirty are not synonymous. And then finally, love. Not the kind of love that is a noun describing how you make me feel. Oh, baby, you're so hot. You got what I need. You know, hey, that's fine. But that's not the kind of love and terminology necessary that we're called to in Scripture. 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 7, define for us the kind of love that we need to have to sustain this kind of passion throughout the years of marriage. Love is patient. You want to be a good lover? Here's how you do it. Patience, kindness, no envying or boasting, no arrogance or rudeness, not insisting on its own way, not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices in truth. Love bears all things. It's a tremendous and amazing amount of grace that's necessary. Believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. You'll notice in this passage that Paul uses love as a verb, not as a noun, not as a feeling, but as a doing. And I'll give you a little secret. The more you make love a verb, the more love you'll make. Little insight. That was supposed to be funny. The more you do these things, the more benefits from doing the right things you are likely to enjoy. So great lovers are husbands and wives who approach every room of the house in the motto of this series, the one that we have repeated throughout, my life for yours. My life for yours. Self-sacrifice, self-denial, deference to the good and the benefit of the other, seeking the interest of the other before my own. And so now the lesson is yours. And to those to whom it applies, Why not go home, have lunch, put the kids to bed, and make personal application of today's lesson? I guess I just don't have it today. I thought that one would bring the house down. In all seriousness, the Bible is a love story. What did Jarrett say a while back? Kill the dragon, get the girl. That is the story of the Bible. It opens with a wedding, Adam and Eve, and it closes with a wedding, Christ and the church. And in between those two wonderful and glorious weddings is a loving God coming after your heart, pursuing you with a covenant love. Pursuing you with a covenant love, a hesed love, a loyal love, a fervent love, coming after you, after your heart, with covenant love and a promise to those who will receive him that I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. So whether we are married in this life or not, we have the promise of God to love us, to be with us, to provide for us the things that our hearts desire the very most. And this morning I want to extend that invitation to any and all, no matter where you are, who you are, what you've done, how far you've wandered away from God. He is in pursuit of you. And nothing puts you beyond his love if you are willing to turn in response and to receive it. And so this morning, if you're broken, if you're hurting, and if you are feeling this morning a desire to respond to the kind of persistent, steadfast love that he has shown, then why not today be the day that you turn back to him? And if you need to put Christ on in baptism and begin that journey today, then we are ready and willing to help in that regard. And if you need the prayers of the church to encourage you to restore your zeal, to ask God to continue to stir you up in your passion for him, then we would encourage you to come and let us know that as well. Whatever your need, while we stand and while we sing.